Today is Monday, September 22nd. We'll tell you about the memorial service for Charlie Kirk, from an especially emotional moment from Kirk's wife to when President Trump said there is one thing that set him and Kirk apart. Also, what to expect from what's called the World Cup of Diplomacy starting today. Plus, the new dollar amount on the American dream, an issue that delayed flights all around Europe. And hello to a new season, it's officially fall. Those stories and even more news to know coming up. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. Nearly 100,000 people gathered to pay their respects to conservative activist Charlie Kirk over the weekend, almost 2 weeks after he was shot and killed. The crowds that filled State Farm Stadium in Arizona heard from President Trump, several top cabinet members, right-wing pundits, Christian pastors, and Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk. Remember, she took over at Turning Point USA, which is the conservative youth group her husband co-founded and led. At yesterday's memorial, she promised to expand on his mission to, quote, point young people away from the path of misery and sin. And in an especially emotional moment, she said she had forgiven his killer. President Trump called Kirk a great American hero, an evangelist, and a martyr for freedom. Trump also pointed out one way in which he and Charlie Kirk disagreed, saying Kirk wanted to help everyone, whereas, quote, I hate my opponents and I don't want what's best for them. In many ways, the event was a celebration of conservative principles. Trump spoke about plans his administration has coming up and criticized past rivals. Other speakers promised to fight back against Marxists, Democrats, and the media. Mourners were asked to donate to Turning Point USA and to register to vote as Republicans. Meanwhile, the FBI is still investigating the shooting that killed Kirk. While there is a suspect already in custody, the FBI director says the Bureau is now questioning where the shot was taken from, the possibility of accomplices, hand gestures made near Charlie Kirk at the time of his death, and so on. To be continued. Well, most of the world's most powerful leaders are in New York this morning getting ready for the United Nations General Assembly. That's the UN's biggest meeting of the year, and it brings together decision makers who aren't just allies. We're talking about senior officials and delegations from several feuding nations like Russia, Ukraine, China, Iran, Syria, Israel, North Korea, and more. It's actually the UN's 80th anniversary. But so far, the mood is less than celebratory as the group deals with multiple wars, climate change, a budget crisis, and other pressing issues. Today, the issue that's taking center stage is the war in Gaza. Just ahead of the General Assembly, Australia, Britain, and Canada decided to formally recognize Palestine as a state. More countries are expected to do so today. But Israel and the U.S. are still against it, with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying it will only make Hamas feel more emboldened. Separately, several UN members will be pushing for a stronger response to Russian aggression, especially since in recent days, Russian jets have been intercepted in NATO territory. The UN Security Council will be holding an emergency meeting on that today. Then President Trump is set to address the General Assembly tomorrow. That's highly anticipated since Trump has ordered a review of America's interactions with the UN. He's also cut funding and withdrawn from multiple UN agencies. Trump hasn't said exactly what his speech will cover, but the acting U.S. ambassador to the UN says the Trump administration is approaching the session with 3 priorities: peace, sovereignty, and liberty. President Trump is pushing his attorney general to go after his American adversaries. He put out a series of public posts calling for action and addressed them to Pam, meaning Attorney General Pam Bondi. Trump mentioned how he was impeached and criminally charged, and that still, quote, nothing is being done, and that it's, quote, killing our reputation and credibility. But in a follow-up post about an hour later, Trump praised Bondi, saying she's doing a great job. So far, no comment from the Justice Department. Separately, the DOJ closed an investigation into another member of the Trump administration. News outlets like Reuters cite sources who say border czar Tom Homan accepted a bag of cash with $50,000 inside. Well, it came from an undercover FBI agent in a recorded sting operation. Then yesterday, FBI Director Kash Patel explained how that all happened last year when President Biden was in charge, and that since then, the FBI has not found any credible evidence that Homan did anything criminal. With that, he said the DOJ's resources will be going to, quote, real threats to the American people, not baseless investigations. President Trump has promised a possible answer to autism. The Washington Post cites sources who say the White House will talk about how one medication may be linked to autism and another may be able to treat it. Specifically, federal health officials will raise concerns about pregnant women taking Tylenol, which is one of the most widely used medications all around the world. They plan to warn pregnant women against using Tylenol early in their pregnancies unless they have a fever. Major medical organizations have said Tylenol is safe for pregnant women, and no study has found it definitely causes autism, though some have found there's a link or an increased risk. The White House also plans to talk about a lesser-known drug as a potential autism treatment. Some early trials giving it to children with autism have shown improvements in their ability to speak and understand others. Granted, many experts say you can't really treat autism, just address specific symptoms. Of course, autism is complex, and more than 100 genes have been linked to the condition. So expect more research to continue. Hurricane season could start to pick up this week. Hurricane Gabrielle is moving through the Atlantic and is expected to pass east of Bermuda today. Gabrielle is expected to stir up rough seas and potentially life-threatening surf and rip currents from North Carolina up the East Coast and into Canada. But for now, it's expected to stay far from land. The National Hurricane Center is also tracking 2 more tropical waves that could bring impacts closer to the shore in the days ahead. So stay tuned. More news still ahead, but first, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all have those moments where we turn to random people for advice, right? The hairdresser or barista or even a stranger in the bathroom. Sometimes it's fun, but they're not always the right person to help us work through life's challenges. For me, actually talking with a therapist has made all the difference. I've always been impressed with how mine seems to know just when to listen, when to agree, and when to push me beyond my comfort zone. So if you're not sure where to start, but you're interested in therapy, BetterHelp makes finding the right match easy. With over 30,000 licensed therapists, they've helped more than 5 million people worldwide. So just fill out a quick questionnaire and they'll connect you with someone who fits your needs. And if it's not the right match, you can switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. So find the one with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/newsworthy. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/newsworthy. Now, back to the news. Today is officially the first day of fall. The autumn equinox happens this afternoon at 2:19 Eastern Time. The equinox is the halfway point between the summer and winter solstices, marking the exact moment when the sun appears directly over the Earth's equator. And in most parts of the world, day and night will be almost equal, 12 hours each. Then for those of us in the northern hemisphere, days will start to become shorter than nights as the sun rises later and sets earlier in the months to come. California is pushing back against certain tactics the Trump administration is using in its immigration crackdown. Over the weekend, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a series of bills. They will protect immigrants' healthcare information, tell families when federal agents are going to schools, and require officers to identify themselves. There's also a new ban on federal agents wearing face coverings in most scenarios, which Newsom says it's the first of its kind in the U.S. He says it's all about transparency and trust, so people know who is enforcing the law and whether officers are acting properly. Some law enforcement groups, though, are against these new measures, saying California is imposing more restrictions on officers than criminals, and that they could put officers in harm's way. For now, the laws are set to take effect next year. But some legal experts say they might not make it past court challenges, since it's not clear exactly what powers state lawmakers have to regulate how federal law enforcement operates. Lawmakers in other states like New York and Massachusetts are considering similar bills now. The Pentagon has new restrictions for the media, and many news outlets are not happy about them. The U.S. Department of Defense, which President Trump has now named the Department of War, says journalists have to agree to only use pre-approved information about the military. That's the case even for unclassified information. And if reporters don't follow those rules, they'll lose their credentials to cover the Pentagon. The Pentagon defends the new policy, saying they are basic common sense guidelines to protect sensitive information. But outlets like Reuters, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and others say these rules are dangerous and that they fly in the face of a free, independent press that's supposed to hold the people in power accountable. So far, the organizations have not said exactly how they'll respond. European airports are finally starting to recover from a cyber attack that caused flight cancellations and huge delays for thousands of passengers over the weekend. Major airports in Brussels, London, Dublin, and Berlin were impacted. Electronic systems were so disrupted that airline staffers had to try things like handwriting boarding passes. And as of this morning, Brussels is still especially bogged down, and flights are being called off for today. The software that was targeted came from a company based in the U.S. called Collins Aerospace. It says it's working to fix the issue. In the meantime, airports are still telling passengers to check their flight status before going to the airport and to use online check-in when it's available. Taylor Swift fans are once again lining up for movie tickets. AMC Theaters announced it's hosting a release party for Swift's 12th album, Life of a Showgirl. It will include a new music video, behind-the-scenes footage of Swift, lyric videos, and some of Swift's personal reflections on songs. It's a nearly 90-minute show that will only play on the weekend of October 3rd when the album comes out. As Deadline reports, on that one weekend, the show is expected to bring in between $30 to $50 million. In the first 24 hours of tickets being on sale, it had already racked up $15 million, even though each ticket is only $12. Fans flooded the AMC app, which slowed down in the face of so much traffic, so some people ended up waiting hours for tickets. But things should be running smoothly now. That's it for the main news, so now it's time for Money Monday, when we talk about one interesting money-related news story. But first, a quick break to thank our sponsor. I've been impressed with OneSkin. From their face and eye products to their SPF, everything feels luxurious. But more importantly, it's rooted in science. Their latest innovation is OS1 Hair, a scalp serum that uses their patented peptide to target aging cells directly. I kind of think of it like skincare, but for my scalp. I want to do what I can for my hair to be as healthy and strong as possible for as long as possible. The serum itself is super lightweight, easy to apply, and doesn't affect how I style my hair. And the results are impressive. In a clinical study, participants saw, on average, a 40% increase in hair density after 6 months. And in another study, most participants said they noticed new growth in even less time. It's a drug-free, prescription-free way to give your hair the same science-backed care as your skin. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. And for a limited time, you can try OneSkin with 15% off using the code NEWSWORTHY at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with the code NEWSWORTHY. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, so please support our show and tell them we sent you. Now, back to Money Monday. The American dream now costs about $5 million. At least that's according to the latest analysis from the financial journalism site Investopedia. Of course, everyone's actual dream is different. So Investopedia asked nearly 1,300 people to identify the goals they associated with the American dream, and most shared the same 8. Retiring in comfort, affording quality healthcare, owning a home, raising a family, owning a new car, going on a yearly vacation, caring for pets, and having a wedding. The report added up the cost of each goal over a lifetime by taking data from federal agencies, think tanks, and industry groups. And in the end, the cost ended up being about double what the average American with a bachelor's degree earns over the course of their career. All that said, one senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute told USA Today, Investopedia might have set the bar too high. He says the whole point of the report is just to get people thinking about how to finance their own American dream and come up with a plan to make it an American reality. Thank you so much for joining us today and for your support of the show. We'll be back with even more news to know tomorrow. For now, have a great day.